Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, and Elon Musk for helping connect us.
We are going to see Elon on Sunday, so he's been an incredible support for us. So I don't know how you want to play I'm totally in your hands. I'll follow your lead. But, I mean, he's been helping us because Britain's in bad shape. And
and that's why you're here. And this is what we're talking about.
The rape gang, we've done, we've crowdfunded this.
Okay.
Which I'm very happy to talk to you about.
Just this title of that, Rape Gang Report.
Yeah.
The idea that there's actual rape gangs in the UK in 2026. And is it being ignored? Is it being downplayed? Like, how is it being received by the media and by the politicians over there?
Well, the history of it is that basically, as you probably know, Britain, after the war, decided they were going to play a part in Europe, a bigger part in Europe. Well, our elite did, the British elite. And to do that, they had to basically diminish the power of the nation state, and they had to head towards this European superstate, which is the EU, the genesis of which was obviously a monopoly.
Why did they have to diminish the power of the nation to do that?
Because I think Britain was a proud nation state. We with the American help, we'd won the war, and we hadn't been invaded or conquered, which most of Europe had been. So you'd had mass dislocation in Europe. Huge numbers of people had been dislocated and pushed all over Europe. And I think the socialists, I was in the European Parliament, so I spent a brief time as an MEP, a member of the European Parliament, when we finally achieved, a kind of Brexit. We can talk about that, but it wasn't a proper Brexit. So I think the genesis of the rape gangs, going back to this, was the fact that multiculturalism was the order of the day. They wanted open borders. They wanted a multicultural society. They basically felt the nation state had been the cause of world wars, effectively starting with Napoleon. Then obviously we had the Kaiser, then we had Hitler. And I think they saw it that way, the Monnets, the Spinellis, and the people who constructed the European Union. So to the rape gang report, which was your question, ultimately the genesis of that is this multicultural invasion almost of Europe.
Can I pause you for a second? So what you think is that the multicultural invasion, the way it was set up, was on purpose, and it was on purpose to sort of diminish the idea of nationalism?
Yes. I think
so this was like a long plan. So this was something that they must have had to sit down and who would be involved in this sort of a discussion where you would be willing to diminish patriotism, diminish this idea that Britain by itself is exceptional and the people are exceptional?
It was a long, deceitful plan. So I always say...
Who implemented it?
The European elites in league with our elite, who effectively, if you remember, in 1975, we joined what was called the European Economic Community. It wasn't effectively anything other than an economic union. But that very quickly changed, and effectively they tried to politically integrate Europe. That failed, and then in 1997 they tried to force it through with the introduction of the euro. So having failed politically, they tried to do it financially. That was my first foray into standing as a member of Parliament to fight to save the British pound, because once you lose your currency, effectively you lose your sovereignty and your national identity. And our gold reserves were going to be shipped out to Germany, to Frankfurt. And we would have become a vassal state, part of the European Union. It would have been irreversible. But in the event, thanks to Sir James Goldsmith, we secured enough votes. We forced the establishment to promise a referendum before they surrendered to the euro. And we ended up saving the pound, which in the end resulted in the referendum in 2016, where the British people voted to take back their sovereignty, which ultimately, I think the establishment always knew that the core, the body of Britain, or body of England in particular, wanted its own accountable parliament in Westminster. It didn't want to be part of an unaccountable European socialist protectionist superstate.
So the quote-unquote elites in Britain and the elites in the United States, it's coordinated with both of them. So
I think less so in America, Joe. I can't speak for America, although when you look at what the Democrats did with US aid and all the stuff that was going on under Joe Biden, you have to wonder whether they began with the World Economic Forum to play a part in this. But I think the post-war plan for Europe was founded on a socialist principle, whereas I think America has always been a very sound, politically based structure, based on obviously, the founding fathers and your constitution, which I always think returns power to the individual and has always understood that the dangers are statist dangers, not individual dangers. So I'm very much in the camp, I like the individual and a minimal state. And I think that's much more in your DNA than it is in the European DNA, which tends to be more statist.
Right. So they did this on purpose, and they brought in people from what country specifically?
Well, initially you got in Britain, you got people from Africa. You got the Windrush generation, so you got a lot of Africans came, ostensibly to fill jobs that they always say the British people don't want to do, and it gathered momentum. It was relatively slow to start with, so you had an influx of people coming to the UK. You had open borders in Europe, so one of the absolute embedded rules they have is this freedom of movement concept. So they don't have effectively national borders. But we still obviously had the channel, but we embraced this and we started this immigration. What happened is it gradually happened, and I think these rape gangs have been going on, or we know they have, for 30, 40, probably 50 years, to a lesser extent. But when Tony Blair got in and he undermined a lot of constitutional sort of historical law, you got an acceleration of immigration from other parts of the world, not just from Europe, but also from other countries, South Asian countries in particular, who came to the UK. And the genesis of the rape gangs really is, I think, the cultural oil and water mix of these people coming from what I call clannish societies in South Asia, and coming to very high trust societies such as the one we had and the one you have here, which have taken thousands of years to develop. So they're high trust societies where, Lee Kuan Yew based Singapore on post-war Britain, where you had honesty boxes for newspapers in London, and you had a country that was completely at peace with itself. So it won the war, it respected peace, it respected freedom. And people were rebuilding their lives, having fought a Second World War to free Europe from sort of, in this case, Germany. Previously, we'd done it at Waterloo when we relieved Europe of the French with Napoleon. So it really accelerated after 97 when a lot of the legislation that Tony Blair and his cohorts passed, such as the Human Rights Act, which embeds within it the ECHR, he created the Supreme Court. They passed laws like the Equalities Act, and there are a raft of other legal acts they passed, which effectively empowered a multicultural society, which in some ways, I think, damaged the interests of the British people.
And you think this is on purpose. And this is my point, is what is the benefit for them to be joined up with the rest of Europe? Is it just purely financial? Is it a power-based strategy where if you can diminish the quality of life for people and institute more laws and put more restrictions on them, you can control them easier, and it's less pushback for the politicians, less pushback for the people that are in charge?
Basically, yes. I think it's the age-old battle between individualism and collectivism. So I think the EU is a collectivist construct, whereas I think Britain, as it was under our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, which, as you probably know, our Bill of Rights in 1689, a lot of that was lifted by your founding fathers who embedded it within the US Constitution. So, and that embeds freedom of speech, it embeds the individual, it embeds all of the rights that I think make the Anglo-Saxon world great.
So how did it deteriorate to the point where they're arresting 12,000 people a year for social media posts?
It's shocking. And this is why I have got involved in politics. I've been involved in politics since I fought the Maastricht Treaty and then stood, as I said, in 97. I did a lot for Business for Sterling, a lot for Vote Leave. Then I stood for the Brexit Party, and I was elected there. So I've been fighting this march towards an unaccountable state, which effectively rewards collectivism and punishes individualism. To the extent that now I find myself at the age of 68 as an MP running a party called Restore Britain to try and reverse this tide, to re-empower the individual, to return to our original constitution, and to protect the interests, above all else, of the British people, to whom I think government should be accountable.
Do they still have that kind of unchecked immigration? Is it currently ongoing?
We still have illegal migrants arriving by boat. They can't be under the current laws and treaties that we're part of. They're not being deported. The judges, thanks to the creation of the Supreme Court, they are now a woke quango. I think a lot of our judiciary is corrupt. So the answer to your question is we still have illegal migration, and we have people living in Britain illegally. We have a lot of foreign prisoners in our prisons. And we have people who've come in under various waves of immigration, one of which, the biggest of which, was probably under Boris Johnson, who was actually a Conservative Prime Minister, who allowed thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to come into Britain. And basically, they are now a burden to the British taxpayer. So the answer to your question is they're arriving illegally still. They're living here illegally, or living in Britain illegally still. We've got foreign criminals in our prisons, and we've still got the legacy of this huge amount of immigration which took place.
And are a large percentage of these people receiving welfare from
Yes.
the British government?
Yes.
What percentage?
Well, most of the people who arrive, they're all supported, Joe. I mean, they're put in
So
hotels.
immediately, as soon as you get there?
In Parliament, I see the contracts. Thanks to my parliamentary questions, I'm allowed to ask questions and scrutinise the contracts for instance, the Bibby Stockholm was a boat which cost the British taxpayer £1.5 billion. It's actually now lying redundant and not being used. But I've seen the contracts for these illegal migrants in terms of the laundry services they get, in terms of the taxi services they get, in terms of the food they require. I mean, literally, it is like it's like staying in a very comfortable hotel. And we've now got these people being settled all across our country.
How many?
In hotels. Well, I don't think the government knows, Joe, to answer your question. I don't think they know how many people are living in Britain illegally.
Was it the similar situation that America had over the last 4 years, where on the low number, they think it was 10 million people came in, which is insane. It's an insane amount of people to come in 4 years.
Well, we think there's enough work to do initially to detain and deport people who are arriving illegally. I mean, to my mind, illegal means illegal,
right.
So it's fairly straightforward. To the people who are arriving illegally, people living here illegally, the foreign criminals, there's plenty of work to do to remove them from Britain. And then I think we need to turn our attention, and that's in our mass deportation document. I've given you a copy of that, which effectively sets out the constitutional reasons why we have a problem, how we correct those constitutional issues, and how we then practically detain and deport the people who aren't supposed to be here. And once we've done that, we'll then turn our attention to people who are living in Britain, to your point, who are on welfare, who are going to cost the taxpayer a fortune for the rest of their lives probably, who aren't working, who are culturally different to us, who have a different view of their religion to the Christian religion, and are increasingly living in small groups of people who haven't integrated, who are living under Sharia law and who have their own courts, and who
They have their own court.
They have their own Sharia courts. Yes, a parallel legal system.
Okay, so it's an unrecognized by the British government parallel legal system that exists inside of England.
It's tolerated.
Tolerated.
It's tolerated.
So they're aware of it.
Yes.
And they're aware of the punishments that this court dishes out?
It's rather like they're policing their own people under their own laws.
And they're just allowing that?
They're allowing that, yeah.
Whoa.
Now I believe, I don't know about you, but I believe if you come to our country, you should live under our laws.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the idea of the United States in particular is a melting pot. And, people come from all over the place, and it's one of the cool things that there's all these different cultures. But there's certain cultures that if you allow them to come into your community and then they institute the laws of the country where they came from, you're going to have a real problem. Like, they don't live the way you live. They don't have the same respect for women that you have. They don't treat them the same way. They don't allow dogs. Like, there's a lot of
That's right.
stuff that a lot of people might not even be aware that come with that problem. It's like, the idea is supposed to be that Western society is inclusive and progressive because we're intelligent and educated and we care. But you can care so much that you let in criminals, and then you give those criminals all your money, and then the criminals can take over your country slowly but surely. So, and this is no one thinks that's a possible thing. No, people look at the Colosseum, you look at ancient Greece, and they think, wow, I wonder what happened to those guys. What do you think happened? Probably the same shit that's happening right now to England, the same shit that could have happened to America. Civilizations fall apart for various reasons. And one great way to get them to fall apart is to bring in a bunch of people, and they don't have to follow your laws, and they bring the laws of, wherever they're from, whatever fundamentalist religion country they're from, where they have a bunch of crazy laws that are kind of archaic.
Well, this is Sharia law, Islamic law, as you probably know. I mean, again, to your point, I think the best example I can give people of what happens if you do that is when Lebanon got its independence in 1948. They were a Christian country, and they were a very confident country. They were they had the best universities. They had a very open society. I never went to Beirut. I don't know if you went to Beirut, but Beirut in the 60s was meant to be the best place on earth to be. Great wine, freedom, very enlightened. It was lots of people were there. The minute that the Muslim population went over about 15%, you started to get a problem with a civil war. You got the Druze and Maronite Christians in a civil war with the Muslims, and now Lebanon is a Muslim country, and Hezbollah, backed by Iran, is effectively running the show. So to your point, I couldn't agree more. And the Rape Gang report, which we've written, was crowdfunded by 20,000 concerned English people who we raised. Not a huge amount of money. We raised about £600,000 in varying quantities people gave. And we did it because the government will not have a statutory inquiry. So our government, and particularly the Labour Party, have been presiding over this because it goes to the Muslim bloc vote. So we have in the UK a system of postal voting. And in a lot of the inner cities and the places where these Islamic populations live, they are or have historically voted Labour. That's beginning to change. They're beginning to vote for Muslim independence now, and I sit with some of them at the back of Parliament. So effectively, this inquiry we did, we set out with a completely unbiased view of what we would find, and we did it because we were pushing the government to have a statutory inquiry. And a lot of the reason I got involved in it was I think it was Elon Musk who triggered. He talked about it because a lot of people in the UK, I don't think, know the extent to which this has been happening and the length of time it's been happening for.